Pfizer has delivered around 2 billion shots of its vaccine, but the vast majority have gone to Americans and Europeans. Fed up with the inequality, countries led by India and South Africa are pushing a proposal at the WTO to waive IP rights for COVID vaccines and treatments. But Pfizer execs are now fighting for control of the secret recipe that's raking in a fortune for them. Bloomberg's Stephanie Baker wrote all about it for today's Big Take. Pfizer fights to control secret of $36 billion COVID vaccine recipe, and she's joining us now from London. Stephanie, really great story for anybody who hasn't read. Thank you so much for being here. So first of all, you start the story off with this tense meeting that happened back in July with WHO's Tedros and also Pfizer's executive. Talk to us about sort of how that sets up where we're currently at right now.
Yeah, I mean, it was a meeting hosted by the WTO with Dr. Tedros from the WHO and Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer, and they were talking about how to get more vaccines to low and middle income countries and what to do about this proposed IP waiver. And when Tedros pushed back, and, saying to the vaccine developers on the call that they should be doing more, Bourla said he was speaking emotionally, to which Tedros replied calmly, no, actually, I'm not being emotional. This is, a real problem. We need to get more vaccines and arms to save lives. And for me, that kind of summed up where we're at, this sort of standoff between public health officials and the executives behind Pfizer, one of the most effective vaccines and one of the vaccines in the greatest supply to make a difference.
And why is there not this shared stance with Tedros and Pfizer to deliver these vaccines to low and middle income countries, Stephanie? I mean, I'm confused as to why they aren't willing to push for this even more.
Well, look, there's been a real struggle over how to make the distribution of vaccines more equitable. And low and middle income countries like South Africa and India saw this disparity coming back in October 2020 when they proposed a temporary waiver of IP protections on COVID vaccines and treatments. Now, for pharmaceutical companies, and Pfizer in particular, that spent quite a bit of money trying to develop an effective vaccine, they view this as a threat to their business model and have pushed back on any prospect of using that as a way to get more vaccines manufactured and in arms. And they've turned instead to trying to donate doses, mostly through the U.S. government. Pfizer did this big deal with the U.S. government for 1 billion doses that they've sold at cost to the U.S. government, which is in turn donating them to countries around the world. But the timeline for that stretches out well into next year. Only about 200 million of those doses will reach low and middle income countries by the end of the year. So you still have this yawning gap between the vaccine haves and have-nots.
And how does Pfizer's stance compare with the other vaccine manufacturers, Stephanie?
Well, Pfizer has pursued commercial contracts with a lot of low and middle income countries directly. And those that either can't afford it or don't agree to Pfizer's terms have been left out in the cold. They have not done a major deal with COVAX, which is this WHO-backed program to get vaccines to poorer countries. They've only done a deal for about 40 million of those. In contrast, Moderna agreed a deal for 500 million doses with COVAX. Again, most of those will only arrive next year. AstraZeneca really stands out as the other big vaccine supplier that has delivered more than 2 billion doses, on par with Pfizer, but the vast majority of those have gone to poorer countries, namely India, through a licensing deal with the Serum Institute. So that's a very stark contrast between the two approaches. AstraZeneca, not-for-profit vaccine, mostly to low and middle-income countries, and Pfizer, which is making an estimated $20 billion split between BioNTech this year from its vaccine alone.
Wow. And Stephanie, you also get into, the Pfizer pill that could also be life-saving for a lot of countries. Is there anything that is going to happen that could potentially change their mind? I think we've talked so much about how this pandemic's not going to end until the whole world is vaccinated. And in your story, you say only 6% of the African continent is vaccinated at this point in time. So what will it take?
Well, Pfizer's line has been, sit tight. We've got this. We will be able to produce 4 billion doses in 2022, which will be more than enough. Moderna has said much the same thing. But ultimately, we don't know if this is going to be required annually, a booster shot for COVID every year, in which case we're constantly going to be playing catch up in terms of vaccinating the world. So Pfizer, with the supply of one of the most effective vaccines, it's the one that everyone wants. As we've just seen from the readout, its booster shot does provide very good protection. There's going to still be a fight and a scramble over who gets the supply of one of the most effective vaccines in the world.
And Stephanie, just finally, I mean, how do you see this playing out, considering all of the different threads that you weave together in your story? Where does this go from here? Is there anything that anybody can do at this point in time?
Well, at the end of November, there will be a ministerial conference at the WTO where they will discuss this proposed IP waiver. And it's really a long shot whether or not it will proceed. The European Union has opposed it. Low-income countries, more than 120 countries have supported some kind of IP waiver on COVID vaccines. So whether or not there'll be any movement on that at the end of November remains to be seen. But I think the pressure will continue to be placed on big manufacturers like Pfizer to share its vaccine formula so that more people have access to it.